economy is all done. The person next to you will eat your lunch in a second. In a second, if their kids are starving.
Good building a web application with web forms, MVC5.
The reality of it is, you got a contract, you got to make money, or even get a full-time job, whatever.
My name is Jason Silvestri. As you know, I'm a web brand developer. I use graphics design and software development to cultivate brand messages for my clients that separate them from their competition, okay?
Hey, what's up everybody? Jason Silvestri here with another exciting JasonSilvestri.com video. So this is video 4 of the presentation tier. We're converting a design into HTML5 and CSS. This is the Proof is in the Pudding web series. Obviously, if you want to know more about why I'm doing this web series, feel free to visit video 1. I'll be honest and say I'm still kind of sick here. I even lost my voice for 2 days. But I'm back, I'm doing this, and I'm feeling good about it here. So just a quick overview. We're going to briefly discuss requirements and what's been done, things I'm going to try to avoid. We'll obviously be converting the video to design into graphics, and then taking those graphics and converting it into HTML5 and CSS. I'm not sure how much I'm going to be able to get into responsive design today, but I definitely want to give you a little bit of insight now and maybe near the end of this video. So here are the requirements for X, Y, and Z Incorporated. We've already banged out a few of these. We did the responsive website design itself in video 2. We also did the parallax 3D photo effect, which was actually really cool. That was in video 3. And of course, here we are in video 4 doing HTML5 and CSS. So things I'm going to try to avoid. There is a bunch of people kind of looking on. Some people are just trying to see if I have the chops. Others are actually trying to figure out how to do some of these things. So I do want to explain enough for those who are very interested, but I don't want to go too deep for those who aren't. And I'm going to do what I can to kind of make a middle ground here when I go through this. So slow, repetitive work, you're just not going to see it. And what I mean by that is, if I see a task that's going to be 20 minutes, an hour, 2 hours, 10 days, whatever, I'm going to fast forward through as much as that as I can, but still reserve, the how to do it part of it. So multiple programs. I will be jumping around, not as much as video 3, mostly just Photoshop and Web Expression. Web Expression is a tool like Adobe Dreamweaver. In fact, you can use Dreamweaver, it doesn't matter. You can use a text pad if you want for HTML and CSS. I simply use it because it's faster than Visual Studio, and I like to use that while I'm building out HTML5 UX and UI experiences before I put it into .NET code. You can drag .NET controls onto pages and that kind of stuff, and it just kind of gives me a better prep before I create a .NET project for the solution. So we're simply going to just take this graphic element that we've been creating, this graphic design throughout the past video too, and we're just going to cut it up into images, and then we're going to take these images, these graphics, and convert that into HTML5 and CSS markup. Now I'm not expecting you to know all this, but it just so happens that I know how to make this jump, and I want to get this part of the series known and allow some designers who are curious to know about code to get a glimpse into it, and vice versa. If you're a developer in HTML and CSS and you're trying to know more about the graphic side of it, that's part of why I'm doing this series. So I do want to talk a little bit about responsive designs. Essentially what you do with the responsive design is you take this, your custom website or application, or your existing website or application, and you convert these media query based views for your smartphones, your tablets, and of course the desktop size. Now many will argue, if you're going to build a mobile app responsive design, start off small. I completely disagree. I think you should really map out the soup to nuts website or web application, add all the features that your heart desires, because then you can at least take away when it comes to smaller views. You can shrink images, you can change the text, you can remove objects altogether and put in new objects for the mobile experience. I just think, that's my opinion. Obviously you do what you want. I just think it would save you a lot of time. It's a lot easier to take away stuff than it is to add to a much bigger picture. So let's hop into Photoshop and start making this happen. So we're in Photoshop. What you're going to see me do, I actually created these into groups and stuff, so this will look a lot less chaotic as I'm going along here. You'll often see me flatten the image by just coming over here, right clicking and selecting all, and of course you can even select the background and click flatten image. And what this does is it flattens the entire image so you can actually start cutting things out. Now, what's interesting about CSS3, and at least nowadays, is that, you know, back in the day, if you wanted this kind of shadow in your image where you see up here by the menu and up above this highlight area here, and similarly, even these rounded corners on these images, you would literally have to go up to the rectangular marquee tool and you'd have to cut out these corners and this top part and this corner and the bottom, and you'd have like 6 or 7 image elements just for that one HTML box. It was kind of an interesting and lengthy process, I guess. But now with CSS3 and HTML5, not only can you bring the objects to life, but the CSS themselves, you can even do gradient backgrounds now without a single image. You can use it by painting it using CSS3. Now, I actually caution against that one part of CSS3 because I've done applications that you do not see the background image show up when you're using straight CSS gradient CSS. So I still recommend, at least for background images, still cut out that background image, which I'm going to show in a minute, when you're doing CSS3. But everything else, the rounded corners, the stroke around the text, all these things I've tested on across mobile interfaces, desktop, multiple browsers, Chrome, Safari, Firefox, Internet Explorer, and it all seems to work out just great. So now that we know this, we're going to start from very basic elements of how we're going to do this. Now, this background color, I'm not sure if this is white or not. I'm going to click on this and see what that is. And that's just, so that's F9, F9, F9. So, as funny as this sounds, all I'm going to do to get this color for the main background of the website is I'm going to zoom in, do Control +, right? Go up here and take a tiny pixel by pixel image and do Control X, Control N, which opens a new file. Click OK. Do Control V, and then you can save this image, this tiny little image. I have a folder called Images I'll just use for now. We'll do main background. And what we've done by saving this little tiny image is now we can use CSS and literally repeat that across the whole back, saving on a lot of runtime when it comes to a huge back image, for example, because we have this solid kind of vanilla color. This goes likewise for a lot of different parts of the website graphics that you can do to just get the background. Because when you think about it, now it's things like we're going to come to the menu, cut out this little tiny piece, and now we can save this as a ping image for the background. Now notice I'm saving this. I'll call this menu back. We'll just keep that naming convention so we know they're back images. Notice I'm saving these as ping images. Now back in the day you would do GIF, and obviously you'd still do JPEG for images. But believe it or not, a lot of mobile devices and mobile experiences are looking towards ping images as displaying their user interfaces. And it turns out that GIF files sometimes won't even show up when you're talking about responsive. Now you got to remember now, we're not just talking about websites or web applications anymore. We got to design responsive. So you got to kind of go with the flow with some of these things. So now instead of using transparent GIFs, you use all pings when you're looking to do mobile. Now similarly, things like these images here, if I do some Control Z's and back up so I can get access to these layers again. Now, when it comes to these layers, you can do things called sprites, where you click on the car, hold down Shift and Control, click on the plane, and then click on the bike, and you have this solid image here. You could then go to Convert to Smart Object, and now you have this object that you can save as a singular image, and then use HTML coordinates to use the same image. And then just use, like, say, coordinates to just show the car, and likewise you would move the coordinates over by negative 500 by whatever, or by 200, and show the plane or the bike. Now I don't do this in particular because when you start getting into things like jQuery and Knockout and Twitter Bootstrap, some of your things you're going to want them as objects. So now that we have the menu up here, now there's things like this raster layer and all that kind of stuff, where I'm just going to fast forward, cut this out, cut the iPad mini out. These buttons we don't even have to do here because we'll handle the text in CSS, and we no longer have to worry about having a button for a button. We can style buttons with CSS now. And we're just going to cut out this footer here. So I'm going to fast forward through all that, cut out just these simple images for you, so we have these on hand, and that's all the images we're going to need. So let me fast forward and do this. So that about does it. So what I did was I took out this back raster layer here, this layer here, saved it as its own image. I took out the iPad mini, the car, the plane, the bike, all as ping images. I took a piece of the menu here, a small pixel by pixel piece of this column, as I did with the background here, which I'm simply just going to repeat across. And now we're cutting out these tiny images using very little as load time when it comes to these images, and the rest of the shadowing and the rounding of the corners and the stroke around the text and even the colors of the text and the look of the text we're going to do in CSS and HTML and web expression. So we're all set here cutting out the images. Now let's move on to web expression to do the actual HTML architecting. So here we are in web expression. The first thing we're going to do is go up to this little icon here, click on page. For now we're just going to click on HTML. You're going to get this untitled _1.html document, and that's fine, but there's two things wrong with this. One thing is it's an XHTML transitional document the web expression is creating for us. We want to do HTML5, number one. Number two, we want to save this as a different name. We want to call this file index.html, which is what most web hosting servers recognize as it being the root document. Default for .NET is generally what it recognizes, but all servers generally recognize index.html. So we'll click Save. Next thing we want to do is we want to create a couple different directories to store our assets, so our CSS, our images, and of course our JS files. So we're going to right click on the root directory, we're going to click on New, click on Folder, we'll call this CSS. The next one we're going to do is right click and do New, and we'll do Images. And finally we'll create one more, right click, New folder, and call this JS for our JS files. So next thing we want to do is we want to go up to File, we want to go to Import, Import Files, I'm going to click Add File, and I'm going to choose all those images that we created in Photoshop. Now I'm going to click Open, and then I'll click OK, and what that did is import all the images that we need for the development of our HTML. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go up to New CSS, and I'm going to create a CSS document. I'm going to save this right off the bat. We'll call this Styles. We're going to save in the CSS directory. And we want to keep that there because the next thing we want to do is we want to change this XHTML document that's pre-created for us, and we want to convert this to an HTML5 document. So this is a transitional XHTML document. There's two versions. There's strict and transitional. Transitional was created for those who were still on HTML4 but want to utilize the latest versions of CSS. Transitional was created to literally make that transition. If this were a strict document, it'd be strictly XHTML, no pseudocode, no workarounds, etc. But in this case, again, we want to do an HTML5 document. So obviously we have the headers changed a little bit. I keep the language tag in there. This is fine as well. The title is obviously going to be X, Y, and Z Company. And here's the body, which you want to have in every document, similarly with the head tag. And the end in opening HTML. And that's all an HTML document really is. And in fact, if we go into the designer and just type in a few things here, a paragraph tag will open up that allows you to enter that information. So if we save this and go to the browser, I mean, that's how easy it is. I mean, we already see content in the browser. Let's just say, for example, we want to create a div container with the background black and the height and width by 300 to 300. We're going to create some inline CSS to do that. So we're going to do that right now. And as you can see, a box was created for us. And as you can see, when I was writing this out, you might have saw it trying to pre-populate that for us. That's a thing called IntelliSense that Microsoft created for Visual Studio and Expression to help you kind of write out some of the code as you go along. So if we save this and then open up in the browser, we have our black box. Similarly, we can X out of here, and let's just say we want to create 2 or 3 of these boxes. We'll do that now. We can very quickly see that we have 3 boxes. Now, because we don't have any spacing changes to this document, if we look at it now, it's just going to be one straight block. But let's just say we want to add a margin around all 4 sides of each box. We can just do margin. Five pixels. And then we can just simply Control-C, Control-V. And now we have this perfect. Now if we do save and go up to the document, we can see we have these perfectly sized out 5 pixel radius margins on each side of the blocks. Now the cool thing about CSS is, even though this is nice, this gets kind of messy, especially when you start writing complex HTML documents. So the best thing you can do in all cases is, first of all, we want to go up to here and we want to add our CSS style sheet as a link reference. And what this does is, this dot signifies as this current directory. If you were deeper in the document tree, you can do dot dot, which would signify you jumping out of each directory. If we go into CSS and styles, we'll see it there. So we just create a linked document to our CSS style sheet. So now we can go over here, we can copy this out, we can open up our CSS style sheets, and we can just do something like dot open box style, open bracket, close bracket. And then we can just paste that style right inside. And that's how easy it is to create a style. Now if we went to Control-C this style, and then go back to our HTML document, and instead of saying style, we can say class. And as you can see, our style is available right to us in IntelliSense. Now if we just were to take this, Control-C it, and then replace these 2 divs, we can see, if we, by saving it and opening up the browser, that we have the same exact styles that we had. And the difference is, not only is it a lot cleaner on the client side, but we have this one singular style to do the changing of all these. Now let's just say, well, okay, well we want another box, except this time we want this box to be blue. We'll go into here, Control-V, we'll call this blue. We'll go back into our CSS style sheets, we'll simply copy this style, do a Control-V, call this blue, change the style to blue, click Save, go into our HTML document, and we can see it's blue. We save it, boom, voila. So now let's just say that we know for a fact that this blue box will be the only blue box we have on this document, and we're only going to have it displayed in the document as it is. Now if we want to go back into CSS style sheets and then change the dot that signifies a class, and then change it to a hash sign, and then go back into our HTML document, we can actually change this to ID. And what this does is it says, oh, well, we know we're only we're only one singular element on the CSS style, because we know based on this hash sign that we're the only existing document, or better said element, on the document. Control S. And of course here's an HTML document. So just very quickly, you can see just by a couple of different things here that we can start creating the CSS and really get deep into it. Now I'm going to fast forward through this because this is literally going to take several hours, but I'm going to bang this out for you in under 30 seconds or less. So here we go. And that's about it. So here we have a lot of different HTML mockup. If you go down here into the viewer here, you can see that we have this very clean menu that we just use some unordered lists, and we have this perfect set of menus, these graphics here. If a user wanted to change the 50% to say 55%, they can do this because we created an HTML mock-up, so they can very easily look at this. Now that message you just saw was the Flash player slash HTML5 JavaScript player. It's Brightcove, where we have a real live video. These buttons here are simple links in HTML, very clean and crisp, different colors here. We did it all in CSS. We can change this verbiage to anything we want. This is all the power of the latest versions of CSS here. So now I want to walk through all the CSS. I want to overwhelm you here. There is over 800 lines of code, but once you get to know CSS, you start copy and pasting different chunks of information here. So first thing I want to cover is this very important easing in CSS and HTML. This helps with the mobile experiences. Once you start integrating in media queries, people will be resizing the elements based on the size of their browser. So we want those mergers to happen nice and clean. So by adding some easing to all the WebKits, which I'll get into in a moment, helps with that transition. Now about WebKits. Now CSS3 is great and all, but there's a lot of different browsers, and each browser has their own way of looking at the newest CSS. A lot of them go kind of pseudo. They don't really follow 100% how CSS is supposed to be. So we're stuck as developers dealing with all these versions of browsers that deal with that stuff. So part of how we mitigate some of the chaos is by using different versions of the latest CSS style. So for example, the WebKit is compatible with Firefox and Opera, but in Safari. But by using WebKits and these different versions that are available, we are slimming down the chances that these things aren't going to work. So about that background gradient style I was talking about, I did provide this just as an example for you, but I also added in that image, that small little pixel by pixel background we were talking about before. That's going to repeat in the background there. This is our navigation menu here. This concept called first child. What we did there is we said, okay, we want a border for every single element. However, this first element, we want to make sure that we have this one special case where we have the border just on the left side here to make it's a nice smooth transaction in between these elements. So obviously if you go to the navigational links here, we got link, we got visited, hover, active. The order of these does matter, how you style it. Of course the logo itself, that's something I kind of normally wouldn't do, which is I simply created two different spans and just made the X green and obviously the rest of the logo black of the words. Again, here's this clean navigation. Something to think about when we're doing HTML and CSS is that section, aside, header, footer, figure are all new HTML5 elements. However, selectors really. But not all browsers recognize them yet. It's good to have them surrounding your containing divs. However, you definitely want to make sure that you don't rely on styling the sections and the headers and the navs. You want to make sure you are styling div containers inside of these elements. So I usually just keep these blank. The figure obviously is a new element where if you have images, it lets devices that use HTML5 recognize it's a figure. So obviously navigate me, scroll me, touch me, all those great kind of things. But we did all this, all these links here, we did it all in CSS. So here you are with these buttons that look phenomenal on the client facing side, very colorful, very vibrant. They're just useful overall. If we go through more of the CSS styles here, obviously these are the paragraph styles. Generally what I like to do is create all the primary styles first, so the body, the H2, H3, H4 head tags, the first set of links that you have here. Clear both helps you with defining div tags that need to kind of have an endless stream down here. You'll see a clear div was put under here, so browsers understand it's endless as opposed to a fixed height. That actually really just that clears the margins and paddings, but that helps with the reset process, so to speak. Obviously if you go here now, back in the day I would usually use relative positioning, setting the different heights and top and lefts and that kind of thing. But nowadays, especially with responsive, you do a lot of floats. And what float says is, oh, I want to float to the left. You'll have an element that floats to the left. If it's float to the right, the element will float to the right. If you have 3 or 4 all floating left, they will just float next to each other. And that's fantastic when it comes to responsive. And of course, here's the image here, where sometimes we're simply just calling the image. And that's about it as far as the content and how this all kind of ties together. I'm probably going to create a GitHub or at least a link. Maybe you can tweet me or email me for this content, just so you don't have to think about going through this to the video and trying to replicate it here. I'm sure I'll find a place to store this. So Google provides ways you can import font families, which has been very convenient, especially when you're worrying about different operating systems. And that's a bit about it. What else? Oh, okay, yeah, I did want to show you this. So the stroke, unfortunately, isn't seeming to play well when it comes to the browser. So instead of using stroke to define the edges of our 55% off and our free, I'm actually using text shadowing, which is kind of mimicking the look and feel. Obviously, I'll restart this again, and you'll see that there's just a small kind of text shadowing below the free to make it pop out a little bit. And that's about it. As far as media queries is concerned, we really don't have time to show it in this version. I was really hoping I could. Maybe I can in the next video. I'll just do a quick little kind of rundown here. So to let's just say, for example, our main container div up top here, if we wanted to change the functionality based on the widths of our devices, we would do something like this, where we would at the 1200 minimum width size, we would change the container to something like 1180 or something like that. And of course, for smaller versions like the tablets of 768, we could shrink the main containers down to the width. So all these major containers here on each of the pages would shrink down to that size. And then of course, you can start getting into each little element. And these are existing CSS styles being modified from above. You can obviously break these up into different CSS style sheets. I'm just using this as an example of how we could simply modify our main containers, even at that level, of course. So that's it. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. I really appreciate it. I wish I could show more in the media queries area, but maybe in the next video I can do that. So next video is going to be about using Bootstrap and jQuery and those kind of things to modify and prettify some of the UX experience. All right, catch you later, guys. Thanks for tuning in.